Hi everyone, welcome to Pitch Perfect. This is our panel in collaboration with the Thought Bubble Fringe Festival. And we're going to be talking about pitching projects to publishers. We're going to be answering questions that people have sent us via social media. We put out the call a few weeks ago asking people what questions they have about the pitching process, and we're going to attempt to pool our knowledge and answer those questions. I guess we'll all say a little something about ourselves. I'm Kat Chapman. I'm a comic creator. I also do marketing for Avery Hill Publishing. And here's my latest graphic novel, Breakwater, which comes out next month with Avery Hill. So yeah, that's my job. Woodrow?
Okay, hi, I'm Woodrow Phoenix. I am also a comics creator and graphic designer, a letterer, all those kind of things. I have been drawing comics for a long time. My latest book is this one, Crash Course, which actually is not available in the UK. I did it for an American publisher, but it's an American version of Rumble Strip, which I did for Myriad Editions here in the UK. And as well as drawing comics and writing them, I also design things, and I was art director at Blank Slate Books for quite a while. Blank Slate published Nelson, which you might know, and many other things besides. So that's me.
Hi, I'm Carrie Frantsman. I am a comic creator. I have published all sorts of comics in newspapers and on all sorts of weird places in sculpture form and various other VR even experiments. So yeah, I do graphic novels as well, and I've published The House That Groaned, which was published by Penguin Random House, and then Death of the Artist was published by Jonathan Cape, and my most recent one is Gender Swapped Fairy Tale, which is out with Faber and Faber in November, although it is an illustrated book, not a comic. Sorry. Yeah, that's me.
Hello, I'm Guillaume. I'm editorial and production director at Self-Made Hero. I've worked for 8 years at Self-Made Hero, and over the 8 years we've done with Emma Haley, the publisher, and the team, various different projects. So if you calculate, I think it's been 100 projects or so. And yes, there we go.
Brilliant.
Okay, so the purpose of this panel then is to look at and talk about the whole process of pitching your graphic novel idea to publishers, you know, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what publishers look for, what they would like you to do, what they wouldn't like you to do, and how to make all that stuff work. So we asked for lots of questions to be sent in from people asking all the questions that they have that no one knows what the answers are to, but hopefully we will be able to give you those answers. So I think Kat has the big list of questions because she sent out a call out. So let's start.
Okay, I'm going to start with Gareth Hopkins, who asks, what's the most effective way of getting a publisher's attention before or during submitting a proposal? He also has some follow-up questions. Should you expect a reply? If you don't get one, how long should you wait before following up? And how many times should you follow up? He also asks, what does a good pitch document look like? Is there anywhere online where we could see examples?
That's a lot of questions.
Yeah,
So we'll just go through them.
The first one is grabbing people's attention, I think, on initial contact.
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah.
I think like it'd be really good to hear, you know, I'll give my perspective from someone on Gareth's kind of side of the computer screen, and then maybe you know, some of you publishing type can give the behind the scenes perspective. So yeah, I mean, I think certainly when I send something out to somebody, I think the three main things you want to do is attract their attention. You've got to remember that you are one of a huge number of emails being sent or a huge number of posts being received if you're going to send physical copies. Number two, you've got to sum up your idea really simply, and you've got to assume that the publisher has a very short amount of time which they're going to look at your submission. And three, you want to leave them wanting to know more. You want to kind of provoke them to email you back, or, you know, pick up the phone and find out more about your pitch. So you're kind of making a little advert in a sense for them. So I would say always to keep your emails very concise and to include some embedded images, but not too many. Check the file size. You don't want to be clogging up their email or getting your email bouncing back. Don't ask them to click through to too many links. They won't, you know, have the time to do that. So be super friendly and professional and polite. Send out your email, and I would always say send your submission to as many people as you possibly can. And then what I usually do is I'll wait a week and then send a very polite follow-up email. Very simple, just saying, have you managed to have a look at the email below? And then never do it again. You get 2 chances, you can do, and I've had a lot of response on the second nudge email. I've had a lot of people who said, oh yes, thank you for reminding me, and you know, loved it and got work that way. But yeah, don't harass them. And yeah, in terms of what a good pitch document looks like, I had the pleasure of running a course with London Print Studio where we got to go around all the major graphic novel publishers at the time, and I asked them, what is your most beautiful pitches? And I got to see some gorgeous pitches. And I'd say, again, your pitch document should look like, you know, it should also attract the attention of the publisher, sum up your idea simply and leave them wanting to know more. And you've got to imagine there's 20, you know, 100 pitch documents in that room. How is yours going to look different? Can you send them something which is a little bit more exciting or interactive, which sums up your idea? Never send them something random. It should always feed back to your to what your story is about. And your job is to entertain them as well, which, you know, you want to show that you can create really engaging narrative and really exciting visual stimulus. So your pitch should be fun and entertaining as well, or serious and devastating, depending on if you're doing a subject like what Woodrow's covering. You know, you really have to get the emotions across of the story you're trying to tell. But I think a good way of looking at it is to try and not do it correctly, but to try and do it in a really exciting, engaging way, which stands out from the masses of other pitch documents and emails they're going to get.
Okay, so I'll say, so working at Blank Slate, I guess, much like will be the same for Avery Hill and Self-Made, we probably got, you know, 2 to 3 submissions every week. Sometimes more, depending on what was happening at that time, you know, in the comics world. So you get quite a lot of pitches, and what you're going to do when you're looking through them is you're going to look at whether people have got their ideas figured out, whether they actually know what stories they want to tell, whether they actually have something ready to go, or if it's just an idea they want to discuss with you. And publishers tend to want to look for things that are going to be relatively well thought out already, because if you think about how many books you're going to be dealing with or looking at, you're not going to have the time to help someone right through the process from start to finish. You're going to be looking for things that are relatively already well thought out, ready to go. So in your pitch, you should already have thought about the beginning, the ending, the way it's going to work. You know, there's nothing more disheartening than getting something from somebody that looks like a nice idea, but they don't really know how they're going to finish it or what size it's going to be, or, you know, because sometimes it can be fun to work on those things, but mostly you don't really have time to do that. So you want to find something that's going to be pretty well figured out.
In my perspective of things, I think pitching by email is just one side of pitching. So you've got different platforms to pitch, and those platforms can be social media, email, portfolio, website, maybe press reviews for the small press. Because when we receive an email, most of the time it's going to be we're not going to look at it straight away, or we might just look at it maybe like a month down the line, just because we have a bit of time to go through the emails. So it's important to send the email with the pitch, with the perfectly structured projects, but it's also important to keep pitching and keep selling yourself on the other platforms. And one of the big ones is the social media one, which kind of loops your pitch by email. So if I receive an email, maybe one of the first things I'm going to do is going to see your social media presence to see if there's a consistency across. It doesn't mean that you have to have a following or that you have to have a big fan base. It just means that you're selling yourself across platforms more than just by sending 8 pages and a synopsis and trying to get attention just like that. It's going to have to be multi-platformed.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
Kat, what about you?
Also, in relation to part of Gareth's question was, is there anywhere online where you can see examples of pitches? Someone else that contacted me in response to our call out for questions was Jim Zub, who's a Canadian comic writer. He's worked with Marvel and all sorts. And he actually drew my attention to a series of posts on his website, which were absolutely brilliant. There was a lot of stuff about pitching on there, including he's put examples up of pitches that he's done and things like that. And he breaks everything down across a series of blog posts that I thought were really interesting. I read through those. It's jimzub.com / here comes the pitch if you want to look for that specifically. But if you just go to his website, in the blog section, there's a whole list of stuff about pitching there, including examples, which is really good.
Is that GIMZUB?
It's GIMZUB. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
We have guidelines on our website as well, on selfmadehero.com / submissions. And what we usually, in terms of the email pitch, what we usually look for is 8 pages of finished pages, a synopsis, and that's it. As for the email, that's about what you need.
Yeah, I would
So
say
an important thing to point out, I think, is that every publisher has their own guidelines for what they want to see, what they want to publish, how they want to submit it. And it's very, very important for you to check out the publisher you're submitting to. You know, you can't really send the same thing to everybody because everybody wants different stuff. Some publishers only publish one kind of thing. Some publishers only publish a certain kind of thing. And there's no point sending a superhero pitch to a publisher that doesn't publish superheroes. There's no point in sending a fantasy pitch to a publisher that does documentaries. It's right. You have to figure out who your publisher is, what stuff they do, and make sure that your pitch, A, is going to fit in with what they publish, and B, you're going to submit it in a way they would want you to. I mean, some publishers don't really want you to email them. They just want you to send the stuff in the post. Some people don't want you to harass them at all. Just send it once and then wait till they get back to you. Because lots of people, I don't know about what you guys do, but you can probably tell us, and we'll have like, say, one day a month when they'll go through all the stuff and have a look at it and have a discussion editorially about what they think about things they've seen and then decide to get back to people. So sometimes it can take a long time for your pitch to get seen, which doesn't mean people aren't looking. But, you know, if you think about, usually people don't have a dedicated person to look at pitches. It's just something that they do when there's some time to do it.
I'd just like to say also, in terms of places to find advice on pitching, Andy Oliver covered some advice which I gave at one talk a while back. And if you search on the Broken Frontier website, there's an article called How to Make a Living as a Comic Artist, Tips from Graphic Novelist Carrie Frantsman on Pitching to Publishers and Potential Avenues for Your Work. And that includes stuff about generally how to make a living as a comic artist, and also has some tip advice at the bottom.
Brilliant. Yeah. Sorry, Guillaume, go ahead.
I can go last, it's fine.
I was just going to agree. Always look for the submission guidelines. They'll always be there somewhere on a publisher's website. And if you can find the correct name of the person to address it to, send it to as well, that really helps. It's so hard to get someone's attention in the first place that if your pitch isn't what they've asked for, then that's just not going to help your case at all.
And just to reinforce what Woodrow said, it is about really fitting within the identity of the publisher. So in terms of the content being published throughout the different years that the publisher has been trading, the publisher is trying to build something, to build a brand and to build an identity. And if you are pitching something that is completely different, and that wouldn't fit, that just is going to be passed over.
Yeah, Avery Hill, we only really publish work that's both written and illustrated by the same creator. So if you were a writer or an illustrator, there wouldn't be a lot of point in sending us anything, because that's not really what we do.
I think it brings back a question as well from Myth Tristam, who said that he'd like to know how to convince a publisher who isn't known for graphic novels that there's a market for them and they should consider his work. And I think the question here is do you really want to ask a publisher to diversify into graphic novels when actually their main body of trade is not doing graphic novels? So maybe the best way to approach them, if you want your story to be with them, is just to pitch it as a story and see if they are then open maybe to having illustrations to accompany the story. And when it's time to submit, just submit to graphic novel.
That's a great idea.
Maybe not the last stage, but most of the time, yes, it would be better to pitch it as a story more than a graphic novel if the publisher is not a savvy graphic novel reader.
I mean, the other option to do is, like, if you can find some really successful books which have done really well on a certain subject which yours is similar to, you could always pitch them to that publisher and then you know, have the added twist of it being a graphic novel. But I've got to say, I don't know if you guys would agree with me, but certainly in terms of the mainstream literature publishers in the UK, I do think that it's a bit more difficult at the moment pitching graphic novels. I know Jonathan Cape, who were a fantastic advocate of comics for a long time, have now vastly reduced their list. And a lot of people were having a go at graphic novels, a lot of different literature publishers, you know, maybe 10 years ago or even the last 5 years. And now I think, you know, people are a lot more conservative in publishing if they're not used to that medium. I think that makes, you know, publishers like Self-Made Hero all the better because they really understand the medium. And if you get published by someone like Self-Made Hero, they can take your book to festivals and they really understand the comic community, where that might not be the case if you're in a publisher who doesn't do that many graphic novels. They'll be trying to sell it through the normal literature avenues as well.
Okay, so should we jump to the next question?
Okay, yeah, we sort of tackled Myth's question there as well. So the next one is from Barry. Any vital synopsis do or don't tips? So that's specifically about a synopsis.
I think there's two things to think about. What a synopsis basically explains what your story is, and the most important part of that is how it starts and how it ends. There's nothing more annoying than a synopsis that says ... and doesn't tell you what the ending is, because you might think it's cute to give people some kind of something to come back for, like, oh my goodness, well, wonder what's going to happen next. But actually what we tend to think is, oh, this person hasn't figured their ending out yet. So it backfires when you try to create some kind of artificial tension. Because what we want to know as a publisher is, does this story have a beginning? Does it have an end? Do they know how they're going to structure it? What parts it's going to take? So although it might seem counterintuitive to you, you've got to explain the whole thing in a synopsis.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, you should just say like how many pages you think it should be, because keeping it succinct is a really important point, right? Just be short and just how many pages you reckon.
And I think synopsis should be probably 1 to 2 pages long, but not anymore. And it's best to keep it simple in terms of telling the whole story within that short frame.
I'd also add that you should make sure that you're entertaining. I think a lot of people with their synopsises are very careful to make it look, you know, correct and to have all it written in the correct format. But your job at every one of these levels is to really entertain. It's your chance to grab in your reader and make them really excited. Even though your book won't be in the synopsis form, you have to make sure that it's doing the same job as your book in terms of really grabbing the attention and making the publisher excited.
Yeah, it seems to me that most publishers will be able to tell very quickly whether it's something that they would be interested in or not. So there's not a lot of point in, you know, including masses and masses of words and pictures, because they'll be able to tell straight away, I think. And they'll contact you for more information if they are interested, and at which point you can give them a lot more detail, I think.
And also think about the fact that your synopsis is the intro to the pages that you're sending as well. So it's not like you have to sell somebody on something completely, because you just have to tell them, this is what these pages are, this is what they contain, this is what they're going to look like, this is how the story's going to go, and then you can read it.
And the synopsis can be also mini comic book in terms of making it interactive and entertaining. It could also be just a 2-pager picturing yourself pitching the project.
Okay, next question.
This was from G. McDermott, who mentioned that the Nine Panels agency did a creator-publisher speed dating style event at one point that was really good. And they asked, it would be interesting to find out about more things like that, but also what about now that traveling is less of an option? So yeah, and anything like along those lines that I've heard of is usually been sort of tied to a festival or something like that, which obviously isn't happening at the moment. So I guess at the moment, email is kind of our primary way of getting in touch. But I don't know if any of you have heard of those types of events where I think you get to sit down with a publisher and show your work for a few minutes at a time.
Yeah, obviously that's going to be very hard to do now, because unless you have some kind of dedicated online appointment with somebody, I don't really know how else you could do that. I mean, that is one of those things that festivals and conventions do make simpler, because you can approach someone at a table and set an appointment time and come back and have a little chat about things. Some publishers are very happy to do that at conventions, and some aren't. Again, it's that thing, if you have to know what the publisher you're pitching wants in terms of how they want you to submit things.
Yeah, I would say, like, there's a big, my partner was pitching at a board game event in America and managed to get on one of these kind of speed dating type things and pitch to like 5 or 6 of the major US board game companies. And that was an opportunity you only would have had through lockdown. So I would look on an international scale, because it's a lot cheaper if you can find one of those events internationally and pitch to a much bigger market than it is, pre-lockdown, when you would have had to buy a ticket and go all the way out there. So yeah, keep your eyes open. There's also opportunities in this weird world we're in.
I don't have really anything to add to that, to be honest. In terms of fairs, they were very important to do that sort of thing. But I think that nowadays maybe there's a way for publishing houses to dedicate maybe a week of the year to say that this is when they're actually considering more so pitches from unsolicited pitches, and whether or not that can replace the timing that we're now living through. Yes.
Okay, next question.
Okay, the next question is from Chloe Green. I think she's from Thought Bubbles, so hi, Chloe. She asked, at what stage do you pitch a project? The outlined idea, a few finished pages, some sketches, or a whole finished book? And I think we've covered this a little bit. I think a whole finished book is almost always a terrible idea. I don't know about you guys.
I actually have it here. I've had Chris W. Kim, who did an unsolicited submission, and he actually sent the whole book. And when I looked him up online, he didn't have much of a social media following, and I think he filled that gap by actually doing the whole book. I think it's a lot of putting yourself into your project to a certain extent, and you really have to not maybe expect too much out of it other than putting your story into form. So it's probably not the best way to pitch in terms of putting that much energy into a single project just by yourself, but it does sometimes work to get the attention that it requires if the skills that you have as a pitching person are not completed by other platforms outside of the project itself.
Yeah, I would always say, like, it's easier to do a shorter amount And so why would you do more? I mean, graphic novels are huge undertaking that, you know, people can take 3 years to finish a graphic novel. I think a lot of us use it as an excuse. We say, oh, we'll wait till it's better and then better until we submit it. But actually, if you force yourself to think very concisely about a pitch, creating a pitch rather than creating an entire book, I think it focuses your mind, and also you can float it out and see what people think quite easily. And the publisher can then have input. They can say, well, actually, I think that character is slightly wrong, or I think maybe you need this twist. And if you've done an entire graphic novel, you can't unpick it. It's really, really difficult to unpick graphic novels. They're such a medium which requires so much packing that they're not easy to edit in their finished form. So I would always say, be brave, float your idea out, you know, focus on a pitch rather than the end product.
What about Avery Hillcat?
Yeah, I think, well, Avery Hill have worked with some creators where they've been very happy to just do whatever that creator wanted to do because they have that much confidence in that person. But more often than not, we work with very young and new creators, and they want a certain amount of sort of guiding through the process, and they want some editorial assistance with the writing, whatever. So definitely, I think we're more on the side of send us the idea, and then if you want some editorial help to sort of bring that into being, then we'll help you through it. I certainly think you might be putting yourself at a slight disadvantage if you send out a finished project, and if the publisher sort of likes it a little bit, but there are things they would want to change, they're going to be worried about how you would take that. So you're kind of giving them a whole thing to worry about, which might not be necessary if you'd just pitched them the idea at an earlier stage. But I would agree with something Woodrow said earlier, which is to be really clear on the page count, the length of the book, things like that early on. I think if you're going to spend your time working on anything rather than drawing the entire graphic novel, I think getting really clear on how much space you need to tell the story is a really good thing to focus on. I think last minute kind of changes to page counts of books can be a bit of a nightmare for publishers because by that point, you know, budgeting's happened and all kinds of things, and it affects a lot. I don't think she'd mind me saying this, but Zainab Akhtar, who does Shortbox, recently posted a thing saying she had kickstarted some projects and there had been some last minute changes to page counts and it had left her in a huge financial hole. So yeah, I think if you're going to spend any time before contacting a publisher, it should be getting really clear about things like that, about your project, not finishing the thing off completely. I don't know if you agree.
Well, in some ways that drifts slightly off the thing because we're talking about the pitch here. And so, you know, the fact that something might change when you're actually engaged in it is probably a slightly different area. But it is probably important for you to have some idea about what scale it's going to be, how long it's going to be, how it's going to work. And it isn't necessary, like we say, to submit an entire finished book, probably just because, as we've all said, you know, if things are going to be changed, then that's going to be more painful for you than if you just submitted some of it for it to be looked at before analysed. So yeah, next question.
The next one I've got here is Jim Zaub, who I brought up earlier, who recommended people have a look at his website for examples. He also made a really good point that I copied out because I really liked this bit. On his website, he says, an editor's primary job is to ensure that their current projects are running smoothly. And here's a hint, it's extremely rare for projects to run smoothly. So it's a question of priorities, and reading pitches from someone that they don't necessarily know anything about is a pretty low priority considering the rest of an editor's sort of workload. So he had a lot on his site about pitching in general and how to think about making that contact with publishers. And that's just repeating something, I mean, we were saying earlier that looking for new creators and new projects is kind of often falls behind masses of other work for a publisher. So yeah, you have to kind of remember that, I think. But the next actual question was, from Lewis Darley, who asked, is it still a good idea to send physical samples of your work, i.e. prints and postcards, as well as emailing a pitch to publishers? And I guess that depends on the publisher and what sort of work you're looking for. I certainly did that when I was a freelance illustrator. But as I said, for Avery Hill, it wouldn't be relevant because we don't use illustrators.
Yeah.
I think postcards are great. They can support an email quite well, especially when we don't have time to go through the emails, just to add the different venues, the different avenues to getting someone's attention. Through the post, I think postcards are great. In terms of fully printed out books, again, I think it's a lot of effort and maybe a lot of money to put into one single project or pitch. So it might not be the best to actually send something that costs a lot of money to print. Yeah.
I think if you look at, well, not that you can see them, but if you could look at any production room, any editorial thing, what you would see is just like piles and piles and piles and piles of books all around you, because not only is the stuff that you're publishing, there's all the stuff that you're looking at, there's the stuff that you want to read, there's the things that people have shown you. So any publishing place is going to be jam-packed with stuff. So some people might enjoy seeing more physical things coming, but most people probably just feel a bit oppressed by it because it's like just something else to look at, you know. So again, you just have to see what your publisher wants you to submit to them. And some of them will say, don't send us anything apart from an email and we'll do the rest. And some will say, yeah, send us everything you got. You know? So it's important to always see who your target is and see what they want.
Have you been very creative in your packages that you've sent, Carrie, or?
Yeah, I mean, I always like go by the principle of like 100 monkeys in a room. So I would suggest, I know you three all have worked on the publishing end, but I would suggest to be brave in how you do it and to think, you know, obviously read the guidelines, but then if they're the way which you can think, how can I stand out from everybody or do something a bit differently? I mean, my first book, The House That Groaned, I cut out the little windows of the house so you could kind of peek through them and see into the next page. And that ended up becoming the front cover, but that was like the first stage of my submission. I did one pitch where it was all about money. And so like I stuck on like a chocolate coin bribery at the beginning with a little thing saying, this is not a bribe. And then, yeah, like all sorts of little ways of engaging or playing. I mean, you could think about the way you send, if the publisher is asking you to send a physical object, a physical packaging, you could, you know, send an interesting object or in a box or something, you know, in an interesting way to do it. I mean, you've obviously got to make sure you're not pissing your publisher off or doing anything they wouldn't want. But at the same time, you really have to make sure you're not just going to look like another person on the scrap heap. Because especially the big publishing houses, they will receive mountains of submissions. And if they've got very strict guidelines, they will have mountains of printed out guidelines with double spacing and maximum 7 words or whatever they are. And how are you going to send them something which will look different and which will grab their attention and look interesting? So yeah, I'd always make sure that you're not following the letter of the law too much, despite what everyone else is saying.
Okay, next question.
Okay, this one we've sort of maybe already addressed. Diana asked, how does pitching differ from the traditional book query letter? Is there as much pressure on the format, etc.? So I think we've already kind of suggested just research. Yeah.
Just one thing is that, so comics is very versatile in terms of the format that you can pitch in. You can make a page, but you can also maybe make a little GIF or maybe make a little animation of your artwork. And that will be an added skill for marketing later down the line. So if you can put yourself in front of a video camera and sell the project on camera, that could be another way of actually pitching, additionally to the normal formats, traditional 8 pages and synopsis for Self-Made Hero.
Yeah, I would say that they're quite interesting. If you see your pitch submission as a kind of way of you showing how you would market the book at the end when it was finished, that's quite a good way of looking at it. That's how I've always started with my books. I've set the boundary as to what I want to what my book will talk about, but I've done it in a way which really attracts people's attention. And I always think about doing it as simply as the little blurb you see next to, you know, Amazon online when you order a book. And then all the pitch material which goes into that can then be used at the end when you finish the book. And you're now looking at how to pitch it and how to make it exciting and attract people's attention with that story again. So I've always often, you know, bookended, I guess, my process of creating a book, and that the pitch itself is very similar, or at least hints at the marketing at the end of the book.
It also points up that, so a query letter is something often that separates out people with agents and people without agents. Lots of comics publishers don't really care either way, whether you've got an agent or not. And if you're pitching yourself, then that's fine because they'll deal with you directly. So that's another thing to talk about as well, is the whole business of representing yourself or not. But ultimately, it comes down to how you want to sell your story. Karen?
Yep, I don't have much to add really. Avery Hill are happy to deal with you whether you have an agent or not. Either way is fine.
So we are not just selling the story at the end, because to get people's attention on social media, we're now moving towards selling the craft. I mean, we've always been selling the craft of graphic novel making, but in terms of the creative process, that's become a lot more important. So if you are already experimenting with making a comic page, you have to also think about how you can value the work that you put into it. And at the pitch stage, you're probably doing that work for free because you're trying to sell your idea. You can look at it through different eyes and see that whilst you're on the comic page trying to finish it, you are actually creating value as well. And if you film yourself doing a time lapse, or if you film yourself working on that page, then that can be added material for the publisher later down the line. And it's actually very, very important nowadays, especially on the social media side of things, where we're not just selling the story anymore, we're selling the craft. The story is very important, but so is your process and how you're making it.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been working on a book with Avery Hill just recently by Zoe Thorogood, The Impending Blindness of Billy Scott, and she's brilliant online. She's brilliant in the way she sort of talks about her book, and she does all that you were saying, videos and all sorts. So give her a follow if you want to see, you know, how she does it. But yeah, definitely as the marketing person for Avery Hill, I love it when a creator's really kind of active online and doing lots of work to help promote the book as well, because we can kind of use each other, you know, spread the word, help each other spread the word.
Okay, next question.
This one we've kind of touched on as well. Ben Dixon asked, how many submissions do publishers get a week on average? What's the quality like? It would just be good to get an idea of what the general experience is. Probably depends on the size of the publisher as well.
So start with you then, Avery Hill then.
They don't really come into my emails, so I don't really see a lot of them. I have seen ones that we've maybe discussed between us, but I'm not the first point of contact really. I occasionally get a query via social media. I don't know what you guys think about that. I'll get someone, because I run most of Avery Hill's social media, I'll get someone sort of asking me in a Facebook message or something whether they can send something in. I don't know. I think maybe as better off looking on their the publisher's website as a first instance, because it will always tell you what their preferred method of contact is. Yeah, I don't really know what sort of volume of inquiries Ricky gets. Guillaume?
We get about 5 a week. I would say.
Mm-hmm.
One a day. We don't look at them every day. We let them pile up like any self-respecting publisher would do. and then we look at them, and then we go through them. And I'd say the most, like 90% of it is just not, it's just not for us. It's not the sort of books we would do. It's you know, some people pitch superhero stories, and I just reply in French because we're not speaking the same language. So it's, you know, I don't actually reply in French, but it almost feels like I'm itching to just tell people to just look a little bit more at what we do, and to see where you fit within the different genres that we publish. It's going to fit in one of the lists that the publisher has. So you might as well make the whole thing a bit easier and actually pitch to the people that actually do the same sort of thing that you do.
Yeah, I mean, at Blank Slate, like I say, we've probably got somewhere between, you know, one and 4 or 5 pictures a week. It would usually be a lot more after a convention, because a lot of people who will come up and have had a word will then send their stuff in when they get back. But ultimately, in some ways, this is not that important to you, how many pitches a publisher's getting, because it's not going to make a big difference whether they're getting 1 a week or 15 a week. They're still going to have to evaluate them in the same way. So don't worry about that.
Okay, next question. How do publishers feel about picking up books that have been kickstarted? This is from Bex on Twitter. Is kickstarting and self-publishing a good idea if you eventually want to go with a publisher because it shows there's a market for your work, or are publishers put off by technically not being the first to print it? I know at Avery Hill we've taken on projects that people have self-published themselves first, and we've taken on comics that have gone out as web comics first and things. So I don't think that's necessarily an issue. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, at Blank Slate, probably at least a third, if not half, of all the books they published were originally small press publications that had just been, you know, worked on in some way to make them into something that could fit into a broader format. So it wasn't a problem for Blank Slate at all. Guillaume?
Yeah, and of course, about the same in terms of Self-Made Hero. I mean, the one that comes to mind is Filmish, which was first a small press and then picked up by Emma because she found it in a comic book shop. And so I'm just going to link back to the idea that you're not pitching just by email. You're also pitching by self-publishing. And if you get picked up, your pitch might look like that self-published 8 pages zine that you worked in. If it's an ongoing project, like a first volume kickstarted, and then you're trying to look for a publisher for the second volume or third volume, I don't think that's a great way of going about it. I think you can build a following by kickstarting your first projects, and then with that as capital, as creative capital, you can then on your next projects maybe approach publishers and say, look, this is who's following me, and they've been buying regularly my books. Now I just need a little less work to work on the actual pages and work on the actual art. And that's where you might want to have a publisher come in and help you and together build a project. But it would have to be a new project.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan actually of self-publishing because I've managed to get a lot out of my self-published projects. I got an invitation to submit to a really big publisher once because of a project that I self-published, and an editor from that publisher was at the launch of that, and so I got talking to him and got an invitation to pitch my first graphic novel, which they declined, but I still managed to make it anyway. But it reminds me of something I saw on Jim Zub's site. There was another line that I pulled out because I really like this. He said, publishers will approach you once you have a viable body of work instead of you approaching them. which is something I kind of, because at Avery Hill we work with quite new creators, we're always like, sometimes you see someone's illustration work online on their social media and it's amazing. And you know that they're interested in comics and writing, but there aren't any examples yet of, you know, a full story that they've done. So it's something we kind of look for in our creators, is evidence that they can complete a whole story, you know, something like that. So I think self-publishing is a great idea, and I think publishers are quite interested in seeing evidence that you can, you know, do projects yourself, that you're self-motivated. I remember I went to the Bologna Children's Book Fair as an illustrator once, just shopping around my portfolio, and the thing that interested most people was a self-published book that was just in the back of my portfolio rather than the actual pieces in there, because I guess, I don't know, a lot of the people that had flicked through my portfolio pieces and not been that interested once they got to the little self-published book were kind of quite taken with it. So it's definitely worth it, especially if you're a new creator, spending a bit of time maybe making some little projects of your own and stuff that you can show a publisher, so that you do have a body of work. Shall I do the next one? The comic is coming on Instagram asked, how much is a social media presence a factor? Do publishers prefer people who are already established online? I think we've touched on it already.
We have, but Guillaume can just recap.
Just recap. Yeah, it's about the expertise. It's not about the amount of followers you have. It's important. It does attract attention. Like if we see 20K followers, we go like, ooh, might be someone who sells a lot. But it's not just that, because you might have just bought your followers. You know, you never know. Yeah. So I would just like weigh in on the fact that it's about the expertise and about how you can publish your work across platform by yourself, and how we can maybe cap that with an extra push to the different contacts that we have in the publishing industry. So it is important, but it's not. If you have been working in animation for I don't know how many years and you have no following on Instagram, we'll still see that your work is if it's a good project, that it has expertise behind it.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to be the deciding factor, but it does come into it. I just had to fill out a form for a publicist in America for a book that we're releasing next year. And social media following of the creator was one of the questions on this form, but it was on a multi-page form that had hundreds of other things on it as well. So it's a small part of it, and you're not going to turn down a book just because the creator doesn't have a lot of followers.
Further than that is, we might look at the interactions that you have with your following more than the amount of followers. Because if you have 300 followers and just 1 or 2 likes every time you post, it's just probably not as valuable as having, I don't know, 100 followers who are continuously interacting with you and you have hundreds of likes on each post. So we look at the interactions more than the actual number of followings.
Okay. Next.
The next question was quite a broad one from Kev Sutherland. He says, like everyone else, I want to know where to begin. He says, I've self-published 3 graphic novels this year because I couldn't find a publisher who would look at work without an agent, or an agent who could take anyone on. Now I'm struggling to find ways to sell the books. So that's quite a broad question. I don't know if anyone has anything to say.
Is it a pitching question? Okay, go Carrie.
I would say, I mean, Woodrow mentioned earlier about the whole agent question. And in the past, what I have done is when I've been looking for an agent, I've approached publishers and agents at the same time. And the moment you get a publisher interested, then the agent is biting your hand off to represent you because they want an easy job. So yeah, that is, if you're having trouble getting an agent, you don't necessarily have to go to the agent first. one point. Yeah, but that is a difficult question, I guess. Like Woodrow said, is it a pitching question? Yeah, you know, there are ways of pitching, and I would look at to like film movie trailers or something like that if you really don't know how to sum up your idea really simply and in an exciting way, because you are creating an advert of some description. But if people aren't biting, and then you should explore different avenues, because there are loads of other ways of engaging people with your work aside from through the traditional publishing route.
Yeah, that's something I thought we could touch on as well as alternatives to doing the whole pitching thing if you're not having any success doing that. But I've already gone on about how much I love self-publishing as an alternative. I co-created an anthology called Tiny Pencil with Amber Sue a few years back, and that really took off. So self-publishing is a lot of work, but if it is a way to get your work out there, and if it's worth a try. If no one's picking up your project, you could try doing it yourself, selling it online.
You should also think about not just publishers. You know, I've pitched to, using the same method. I've pitched to editors and, newspapers and companies. I mean, we were doing the accessibility panel the other day and looking at, audience panel, which with Hannah Berry, and looking at all the different ways you can get your work out there. And I was always saying the benefit of comics is that, you can tell a story and engage people from any different, walks of life. So, I've heard Zoom Rockman doing, getting a comic residency at a restaurant. And I remember Joe Deasy said he once had a residency in Brighton, on a Brighton bus. So there are other people who could be wanting to tell stories for their companies or for their organization in different ways. So you don't necessarily have to think as small as putting it in a book. Your comic could go anywhere in any platform.
And
also platform.
Yeah, and also so just to support that, is publishers are not the only funding bodies to be able to push your work to readers. You can find funding elsewhere for your work if you've exhausted who you are pitching to. There's always a way to get the work out there.
Okay, next question.
Oh, this was a really good one, actually. V on Twitter asked, how best to approach a publisher as a less abled artist? For example, permanent wrist injuries that significantly affect work speed. With crunch culture so prolific, it's difficult to feel confident when you can't compete on the same level.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would say that based on what we did at Blank Slate, is that someone's ability to complete the project is all that really counts. If you think that you're not able to do more than a page a week for the next 2 years, then that's fine. If we want that book, then we'll just work with you to make sure it gets done, and we'll schedule it when it looks like it's ready, and that's fine. I don't think anyone's going to say you can't work fast enough, so we're not going to take you. If they'd be idiots if they did. Because what counts is the book itself, and your reader is not going to know how long it took you to make a book. In some ways, that's the most heartbreaking thing about comics. Is that you can spend 6 years on a book that someone can read in 20 minutes. And that's just the medium. That's how it works. So we know it takes a long time to make these things, and that kind of stuff is factored into the decisions people make about what they take. So that shouldn't be an issue. Kat?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say just be really open about what your expectations are, what you think you can achieve realistically, and the publisher should be willing to work with you if they're interested in your book. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, transparency is key. And it doesn't, it will be a work that you do with the publisher. It won't be the publisher pressuring you to complete within a deadline they've just made up themselves. It'll be an agreed deadline. And so I'd say that it'd be probably good actually and beneficial for both you and the publisher to calculate the exact amount of time that you take to create a page, and be completely transparent about that.
I mean, because no good publisher is going to impose a deadline on you that you can't make, because that wouldn't make sense commercially. You know, why would you schedule something and spend time planning it out and get a print slot for it if you don't think the artist can do it? That would just be nuts. So, you know, as long as you're upfront about, this is how long it takes me to make something, are you interested? You know, if people like what you're doing, then they're going to figure it out. So that's okay.
Yep.
Makes me think of the production line, it makes me think of the production line that maybe the superhero comics have, and maybe that question maybe is tied to that, we don't work in a production line in the sort of graphic novels that we do. So the timing is everything, but it will be agreed on. It's
yeah, but that's an important point actually, because of course superhero comics and that kind of industry relies on things coming out monthly, you know, on a kind of rolling schedule. So of course, if you can't do 30 pages in 30 days, then yeah, you're not going to be cut out to be working in that market, because that's what they demand. But books are not like that. You know, books come out when they're ready. So that's a whole different way of thinking about how you make stuff.
And also, I think just keep the dialogue going with your editor, and it goes for things that you might be, you know, turning in late as well. Just in general, I think just keep them posted. I've had that where I've had to go to my editor and say, I really don't think I'm going to get this done by when we said. But if you do that as soon as possible, rather than leaving it until the last second and then having a horrible kind of disaster, stressful moment, just keep talking to them and saying, I'm anticipating this taking maybe another 3 weeks or something. And then, you know, telling them that as soon as possible so that you can kind of continue to work together. Yeah, I think there's just one more question. This is from Rob Marland, who says, what type of projects are best suited to pitching to publishers versus maybe taking a self-publishing approach? He says that he feels he wasted a lot of time approaching publishers early on before he was aware of self-publishing as an option. And he feels he could have spent that time making comics, just making the comics and DIYing it.
Yeah, so again, that comes back to something we've been saying all along, is that it's important to know what kind of stuff your publisher wants to publish. You know, look at what they've done already, look at what's on their site, look at their specs, what they ask for, and figure out if what you've got is a good fit for them. Because, you know, you can save yourself a lot of time and heartache by not pitching unsuitable things to somebody who's not going to be interested. I mean, sometimes, of course, there's no way to know. You might have some idea that they haven't covered in their specs, and then you just have to wait and see. But generally, you know, you're gonna have a pretty good idea about what people want just from looking at what they ask for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a whole romanticism about getting published, and I don't think maybe the market is quite there yet in terms of like that being the only way to get the work out there. So I think that the idea really, if you're into comics and if you're creating comics, is to reach a level of being happy with what you're making and what it gives back. And most of the time, for a long time, especially when you're beginning out, it's going to give you back creatively more than financially. And I think it doesn't really matter the platform or the form. It's just about getting the work and continuing doing the work without seeking approval from maybe a publisher. So DIY is definitely the best way to do it, because I'm no one to tell you what is good or not good. It might just be a different timing that is needed, or different content, or different. There's so many different things that have to be taken into account. And I think the best thing to do is to just keep creating in different ways.
Well, I think Carrie can probably tell something about doing things no one's particularly asked for, or going against guidelines, because that's kind of what you do, isn't it? You just...
I I like the doing things which people haven't asked for. I'm always throwing comics at people. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a strong believer in comics being multimedia, and like I said earlier, I done comics in virtual reality. I've done comics in newspapers. I've done comics as theatre sets. I've done sculpture comics, and I mean everything. And each time I have to pitch to completely new different audience. So, you know, I've pitched to publishers. I've also, done projects in collaboration with art institutions and art galleries. I mean, like, it's just about being flexible, I suppose. And I think, to be honest, to make an actual living as a comic artist nowadays, you really have to be entrepreneurial if you're not going to go down the route of kind of superhero comic. That the industry in the UK is varied, and you've got to be flexible as well. I mean, I think if you're into storytelling, visual storytelling, comics, there's lots of sequences in the world you can find and lots of places to fit stories. And I think being innovative about how you do it is really exciting. And yeah, you know, like we said, there's so many exciting opportunities to find people who need stories to be told. I've done a lot of work with Positive Negatives, which I mentioned in Hannah's panel the other day. And Positive Negative use comics to talk about humanitarian issues, and I've done a few stories for them about Bangladeshi garment factory workers and refugees, using all sorts of innovative, exciting mediums, and they're being commissioned by, you know, NGOs and charities who have really important messages, but their research is being left in dusty libraries. So Positive Negative, the organization, is you know, teaming them up with animators and comic artists to make their stories much more accessible and open to the public. So yeah, there's lots of people at Crossroads doing this sort of thing. So don't be scared to go out and find someone who needs their story to be told. Obviously make sure that it aligns with what you're interested in, but then you could have a fantastic collaboration. And you don't need the publishers. No offense to all the publishers here.
No, I definitely agree. As Guillaume said, there's this sort of cachet to being published, but it's not necessarily something you have to, you know, that's the only thing to define your success. And also it's never really personal if someone likes what you're doing or not. I always think of Dr. Dre, who, when he made The Chronic, he could not get any company to take it. So there you go. You know, it's just look for other opportunities if it's not working at the moment, and don't take it personally if you can't get any interest. There's just so many other things you can try. Be really active in the comics community and talk to people and find out what people are doing, and try and, you know, collaborate with other people. There's lots of stuff to try.
On that positive note.
Okay, so I think that wraps up our pitching panel. So thank you all.
Yeah, this panel is going to go online as part of Thought Bubble Online Fringe Festival this year. It's going to be hosted on the Avery Hill YouTube channel. So if you go on YouTube and look for Avery Hill Publishing, you'll be able to find it there. And hopefully it can stay there so people can refer back to it as and when they need to.